Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1149 for February 15th, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
It's our most valuable market. 20% of all our exports go to the US. So in real terms, that's significant, and that's 15% down in terms of volume since tariffs came into effect.
The Scotch Whisky Association released 2025 export data this week, showing a global decline in Scotch whisky exports, both in terms of value and volume. The U.S. led the declines with a 15% drop in exports by volume since tariffs went into effect last spring. We'll go through the numbers with Scotch Whisky Association CEO Mark Kent later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast, whiskey's longest-running and most awarded podcast series.
Hey, it's Gabriel from Dewar's Whiskey. Here's a quick tip. Whenever you're pouring great whiskey, especially something like Dewar's 12-year, don't overthink it. All you need is a few glasses and a couple of people worth sharing it with. The rest takes care of itself. Back in a bit.
Let's get started with the week's news. The Scotch Whisky Association report wasn't the only bad news the whiskey industry received this week. A report by the restructuring firm BTG found 19% of Scotland's distilleries are facing financial distress, and more than 200 distilleries in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland also said they were struggling. BTG's Thomas McKay called it a perfect storm of lowering demand, rising production costs, and increased tariffs in key markets, including the U.S. He said in the report that otherwise healthy distilleries are using their cash reserves to stay afloat and need to restructure to survive the downturn. Diageo has avoided a boycott of Crown Royal Canadian whiskey in Ontario, one of the world's largest whiskey markets. Premier Doug Ford had threatened to pull Crown Royal off of the provincial liquor monopoly's shelves if Diageo went ahead with plans to close its bottling and blending plant in Amherstburg, Ontario this month. Now the Canadian press reports Ford has called off his boycott after Diageo agreed to invest $23 million in Ontario, including $11 million to buy grain-neutral spirits from a producer in eastern Ontario and $500,000 for economic development projects in the Amherstburg area. Crown Royal is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario's second-largest selling product, and leaders of other provinces with Diageo facilities were afraid a boycott in Ontario could have nationwide implications. In other news, 5 hours of testimony Monday in the Uncle Nearest receivership case ended with no resolution. The judge hearing the case gave Uncle Nearest founder Fawn Weaver and Farm Credit, the bank that's trying to collect $108 million in back loans, until the 26th of this month to submit arguments. Weaver wants the receivership terminated and control of Uncle Nearest handed back to her, while Farm Credit and the receiver want to expand the receivership to include other businesses owned by Weaver and her husband Keith. Court filings from the receiver indicate Uncle Nearest is insolvent, while Weaver claims there's enough money to pay the company's debts. Bardstown Bourbon Company and its parent company Lofted Spirits are facing a whistleblower lawsuit filed by the distillery's former human resources director. Sylvia Sanders is accusing the company and its owners of gender discrimination and retaliation in the lawsuit filed in Bardstown. The Lexington Herald-Leader claims Sanders claims she was fired after reporting discriminatory slurs, racial and sexist bias, and underage employees drinking on the job, among other things. A Lofted Spirits spokesman denied the allegations and said the company is looking forward to defending itself against the claims. Lofted Spirits is owned by Pritzker Private Capital, which is a holding company for the family of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Lots of new whiskeys to talk about this week. Redbreast has unveiled the 5th edition in its Iberian series, a Moscatel-finished single pot still Irish whiskey. The whiskey was originally matured in a combination of American oak and Oloroso sherry casks, then finished for 16 months in Spanish Moscatel wine casks. It's available with a recommended retail price of $110 a bottle. The Macallan is releasing a new James Bond-themed release to mark the 55th anniversary of Sean Connery's Diamonds Are Forever film. It's the first Macallan release to use red wine casks in its maturation, and part of the whiskey was matured in sherry-seasoned European and American oak. The whiskey will be available through the Macallan website and at the distillery in Speyside for $750 a bottle. By the way, it was distilled in 2007. Compass Box is releasing whiskey maker Angela D'Orazio's first crack at the annual Hedonism blended grain release. It'll be available later this month and uses whiskeys from Port Dundas, Cameron Bridge, and Strathclyde distilleries, along with some blended grain stocks from the Compass Box inventory. This year's label features a portrait of Scottish actor Karen Gillan, created by artist Emma Hack. The 2026 Hedonism release will sell for around $165 a bottle. Michter's is out with its first batch of Celebration Sour Mash whiskey since 2023. The blend features Kentucky straight rye and bourbon, with cask ages ranging from over 12 to over 30 years old. Only 315 bottles will be available with a price tag of $6,000 each. Green River Distillery is releasing a full-proof version of its wheated bourbon. The barrels were aged for between 5 and 7 years, and the whiskey is bottled at 54.65% ABV. It's priced at $50 a bottle. I have a sample of it, and will share my tasting notes for it later on. Sazerac's Traveler whiskey is also coming out with a full-proof bourbon. It's bottled at 60.5% ABV, and the recommended retail price is $39.99 a bottle. Barrel Craft Spirits is upping the Hazmat Whiskey Arms race with a new 18-year-old blended American whiskey, finished for 8 years in orange Curacao barrels. It's bottled at a whopping 71.05% ABV and is available exclusively through the Barrel Craft Spirits website. The price, $199.99 a bottle. From England now, Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery has created 2 new whiskies to join its flagship single malt in a new core range for the distillery. One is finished in Muscatel sherry casks, while the second is finished in shaved, toasted, and recharred red wine casks. The distillery is about to celebrate its 10th anniversary this June. And finally, they're still celebrating in Seattle, where last Sunday the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl. Jim Beam has released a limited edition Seahawks bottle to celebrate. Jim Beam is the official bourbon of the Seahawks, and the bottles are one of the less expensive Super Bowl commemoratives on the market, just $14.99 at stores in the Seattle area. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. Let's check the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Speyside whiskey fans, pay attention on Wednesday. That's when the schedule for the Spirit of Speyside Festival goes live. Tickets will go on sale next Tuesday, and the festival is April 29th through May 4th. Between now and then, the Whiskey Wonderland takes place in Ottawa, Ontario this coming weekend. Julio's Liquors in Westboro, Massachusetts has its annual Go Whiskey Week, starting on the 23rd and running through March 1st, with events every day that week. The Whiskey Exchange's annual Welcome to Whiskey show is on February 27th and 28th in London, and the New York Whiskey and Spirits Fest is on the 28th in New York City. The Galena Whiskey Weekend is March 7th in Galena, Illinois, and the whiskey consultant, Ajay Bardwaj, will hold a Whiskey Ambassador class in Toronto that same day. WhiskyCast listeners can save 20% with the promo code WhiskyCast20. And finally, the Drinkmonger Spirits Fair is March 14th and 15th in Edinburgh, Scotland. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Throughout the years, Dewar's has created some incredible whiskeys. But our new Dewar's 12-year-old, that one's a personal favorite. It's the kind of scotch that earns praise from the pros, but still feels right at home in the middle of a good night with friends. Every pour opens up with notes of vanilla, toffee, baking spice, and a smooth oak finish. It's rich, it's approachable, and it has a way of bringing people together, whether it's around the table, the fireplace, or just wherever the night happens to take you. Look, the glasses may hold the whiskey, but the whiskey, that's what holds the moment. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025. Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey. Scotch whisky exports fell last year for the second straight year, according to customs data released this week by the Scotch Whisky Association. Global volume of exports was down by 4.3%, while the value of those exports was off by 0.6%. The U.S., Scotch whisky's largest export market by value, was down by 4% for the year, but 7% after tariffs took effect last spring. Volume was off by 9% for the entire year, but by 15% between May and December because of tariffs. Let's go through the numbers now with Scotch Whisky Association Chief Executive Mark Kent. So a 15% drop in exports to the U.S., your most valuable market. What does that mean in terms of real production?
Well, as you say, Mark, it's our most valuable market. 20% of all our exports go to the US. So in real terms, that's significant, and that's 15% down in terms of volume since tariffs came into effect. And of course, the US is our biggest market, but also the industry with which we work most closely. So you're familiar with the fact that the barrel trade in bourbon casks to Scotland is important. When our volumes drop off, so do our purchases of barrels from the US, and that's actually happened. The other thing which is noteworthy for us in these figures is the importance of the US as a market to some of our smaller producers, because they are having a very challenging period at the moment, because their journey tends to be the domestic market, which is difficult for us. We've just had 17% cumulative tax increases over the last 3 years. Then it's the countries in Europe, and Europe's remained stable, but there's been a lot of friction in terms of trade post-Brexit, which we think we're just now coming through. And then we've got obviously the US, which is their next breakthrough market, and that has been very challenging. So we've got the US market, which is quite soft at the moment, plus the tariffs. So that's the short-term concern is definitely there. The long-term potential for the industry, with great product and a great variety of markets worldwide, is clear. And one of the things over the past 12 months, which has been encouraging, has been the agreement of the UK-India Free Trade Agreement, which opens up the possibilities for greater exports to the world's biggest whiskey market. And one of the challenges for us over that period will be to ensure that our producers are able to take advantage of that. And in particular, our smaller producers, who up to now have maybe shied away from exporting to India because of the high external tariffs. So it's a mixed picture in terms of short-term challenges, especially for our smaller producers, but the long-term potential, if we can get over this very difficult period in the immediate term, I think the long-term potential remains strong.
Going back to the U.S. for a second, how much of this was based on economic softness as opposed to tariffs?
I think there's a combination, to be honest with you. I think we've seen, markets in general post-COVID have dropped comparatively, because we saw a big peak during COVID because of issues to do with logistics, issues to do with the closure of the on-trade, which meant that people were drinking more at home. And then that sort of has recalibrated post-Brexit in terms of inventory, etc. So if you look at the overall trend lines, I think you'll see that the overall trend is still a gradual increase. But what we noticed more was a lot of spikiness of peaks and troughs immediately following COVID, which I think now we're going to see is going to more or less come back into a more normal range.
You've warned that more businesses will close their doors for good this year. Are you hearing any signs of distress among the industry?
Well, there was you may have seen there was a report which was out just early this week saying that 20% of all distilleries are showing signs of distress. And it's not just in the distilleries, it's across the whole supply chain. So when I meet, as I did last week with farmers, they say, well, what's happening with the US market? What's happening with India? Because that affects the amount of malting barley we're going to be planting. And similarly, the maltsters, the maltings, we've seen maltings close in Scotland, and the effect on the hospitality trade. And then on the other hand, we see in the US, because, our American colleagues are in a similar situation. We see the closures of cooperages, for example, because the barrel trade is dropping off. So, we are symbiotic with the US industry. So when it goes well for one, it tends to go well for the other. And when there's challenging times for one, there'll be equally challenging times for the other. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
Have you had any luck in persuading the UK government to do something more to get 0 for 0 tariffs on Scotch whisky?
Well, we have made clear our position, and our position is the same as our US colleagues. Both of us are united in our call for a return to this basis of trade. As I understand it, the issue is on the table, but that the discussions are ongoing at the moment. So we hope that there can be a resolution in the first part of this year, and that's something that I think the UK government is looking for, but as of yet, we have no firm news.
You noted in your statement that you're looking at a July deadline for the possible resumption of the 25% Scotch whisky tariff in the U.S. based on the Boeing-Airbus dispute. How much damage would that cause if it's reinstated?
It would be, catastrophic's a big word, but it would be very serious indeed. I mean, we certainly don't want to get to that point. And as you know, these are two separate issues. In the Boeing Airbus, ourselves and Bourbon were hit as collateral damage and retaliatory action for a dispute which had nothing to do with us. But nevertheless, 25% tariffs on single malt led to a loss to our industry of about £600 million over a period of about 18 months. So that coming back would lead to a cumulative tariff of 35%, which would be very bad. Now, we hope we don't get that. As I say, the two are not related, and we hope that for the sake of both our industries, that this issue can be settled before we get to that point. But it is a concern with that looming, and given the state of the industry at the moment.
You also reported decreased exports to the Asia Pacific region, despite the tariff reduction from China that just came out a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, that's going to take some time to take effect. But what happened in the Asia Pacific region?
Well, the Asia Pacific region had been growing, and we would have expected and liked it to grow a little more than it has. There's been a certain amount of stagnation, and that I think is for a variety of factors. As you say, it's good that in January the tariff in China was reduced to 5% following the Prime Minister Starmer's visit there. And in other markets, there are some market-related issues in terms of tariffs. There's some issues around the economy in individual markets, and the fact that if we look across the ASEAN region in particular, you'll see that the EU has done deals, the US has done deals, and I think the UK is lagging behind. So certainly that would give a boost to the exports in the region. We hope to see a return to growth in Asia over the over the period of 2026. Having said that, of course, India remains a bright spot, which continues to grow, both in terms of volume and in terms of value.
Were there any other bright spots?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at our overall figures, Mark, I mean, you'll see that we're about 0.5% down on value of our overall exports, and around 5% in terms of I think 4.6% in terms of the volume. Sorry, 4.3% in terms of volume. So it is a fall. But it's not, obviously we're talking across the piece. Europe has remained broadly stable. There have been some rises and some falls, but Europe is a mature market, and as you would expect, there's less volatility there. So the big noticeable issue when you look at those figures, as you say, is actually what's the state of the US market as our biggest market.
You mentioned the 17% increase in excise duty over the last 3 years in the UK. The Starmer government, before it was elected, promised to support Scotch whisky. This doesn't look like they're supporting it.
It doesn't feel like that at the moment to many of our producers, because we do need a strong domestic base, even though we're an export industry, and the UK is our 5th biggest market. So what the producers, and especially the smaller producers, are having to weather is this increase in excise duty, as well as issues such as increased energy costs. The UK has got very high energy costs, and we're an energy intensive industry. Rates and other issues as well in terms of the general cost of doing business, greater regulation in terms of extended producer responsibility, recycling, etc. So it feels like there's a sort of a series of challenges which are coming and hitting our members in the domestic market, and of course the high and we would say unfair tax system, which is biased against spirits. So, for example, if one unit of alcohol in spirits is taxed 4 times more than 1 unit of alcohol in cider. So this is an uphill battle that we are facing in our domestic market. But it also sets a poor example when we go into other markets and have unfair taxation systems abroad, because obviously they will look at our own taxation system, which is skewed against the spirits production and skewed against Scotland, which produces 70% of all spirits in the UK.
Are we headed for another whiskey lock, or are we there already?
Well, I mean, we talk about whiskey locks. Look, the industry is very resilient. And what we have is a quality product, and what we have is an industry which is able to adapt. So I don't think that we're heading for anything over the long term, which is going to impede us from managing our potential. But there are real challenges at the moment, and production is in many companies on both sides of the Atlantic. Production is being scaled back to take account of the prevailing conditions. But we are confident that with the necessary support of the government and the help in markets abroad in terms of reducing market access barriers, over the long term, we still have the potential to continue growing because we've got a great product.
Thanks to Scotch Whisky Association Chief Executive Mark Kent for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glendalough Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly and we do them right. We start with a smooth single-grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice and signature smoothness. This is a whiskey at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the new Green River Full-Proof Wheated Bourbon that I mentioned during the news. It's bottled at 54.65% ABV, and the nose has touches of wheat bread, dried fruits, honey, vanilla, and soft spices. The taste has notes of red apples, peaches, white pepper, milk chocolate, oak tannins, honey, and vanilla, while the finish is long and dry with lingering pepperiness and dried fruits. I'm scoring the Green River Full-Proof Wheated Bourbon a 93. Next up, the latest release from Pennsylvania's Stoll and Wolf Distillery. Their 100% pure rye made from a combination of 80% Rosen heirloom rye and 20% malted rye. This single-barrel release is bottled at 53.5% ABV. The nose has notes of rye bread, baking spices, and molasses cookies. The taste is thick and chewy with clove, allspice, and cinnamon notes, balanced by touches of molasses and milk chocolate. The finish, long and spicy. I'm scoring the Stoll and Wolf 100% pure rye a 92. Finally, the folks behind Louisville's Watch Hill Proper Whiskey Bar have released an 18-year-old bourbon under the Watch Hill label. It's bottled at 64% ABV, and the nose is full of apple pie, black cherries, soft spices, caramel, and oak. The taste is thick and oaky with tannins and spice dominating the palate, with black pepper and allspice notes, along with caramel and a touch of apples. The finish is long and oaky with a touch of dried fruits. I'm scoring the Watch Hill 18-year-old bourbon a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of more than 3,900 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. Had several comments on the Scotch Whisky Association report after I shared it in the WhiskyCast community app and on social media. Whiskey Dev writes in the app from Malaysia, I'm not surprised, at least from my personal perspective, drinking around the ASEAN region. The ASEAN countries typically have a high sin tax regime, so alcohol taxes keep rising almost yearly. Whiskey prices have also been rising dramatically since demand boomed over the last 10 or so years. At present time, whiskey is often seen as too expensive for the everyday guy at the pub and more for the person with an expense account entertaining clients or the wealthy. Hence, the market has fallen away for the volume expressions, 10 to 12-year-old whiskey, but is still holding up for the value, 15 to 21 years old and above expressions, which the wealthy and expense account clients opt for. I have heard of brands missing sales quota volumes by anything from 10 to 50%, but most have said the value premium side of the business is holding up and minimizing the strain on the overall business. Thank you for that, Dev. Victor Brierley posted this comment on Facebook. Scotch whiskey has been a Westminster plaything, an English cash cow for 203 years. Scotland isn't in charge of a drink named after it, eh? It's a ridiculous state of affairs. The Scotch Whisky Association is a toothless lobbyist for behemoths. The Diageo tail wags the Scotch whiskey dog. Thank you for the comment, Victor. We also had comments on the Uncle Nearest situation and last week's interview with Janet Patton of the Lexington Herald-Leader. Hugo Dart from Brazil posted this note on Instagram. Janet Patton's thorough analysis of the situation of Uncle Nearest was very enlightening. It seems pretty clear that a lot of very questionable decisions made by the owners over the years, and several questionable statements being made now, are to blame for the difficult position they find themselves in. It is a shame, though. The Uncle Nearest brand deserved better. What's your take? Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, and Instagram. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. We have a clue as to what the next big finishing barrel is likely to be, thanks to the folks at the drinks business. They had a story the other day on an Austrian cooper who has patented a new barrel design, one that replaces the wooden heads at each end with stone. Manuel Schoen designed the hybrid Fass to produce wines with a fresher, clearer style than those produced in 100% oak. He claims stone is a calming element that doesn't let oxygen through, doesn't require toasting, and allows the wine to settle in peace. So far, it has yet to be tested with whiskey, though the stone heads, either granite or slate, would minimize evaporation and the angel's share. Give it time. Some whiskey company is probably already calling Schoen's cooperage for more details. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. We'd love to hear from you. Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store, or find us on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
There's something special about opening a bottle of Dewar's 12-year with the people who matter most. It brings out the stories, the laughter, and the kind of moments you don't plan, but never forget. Build on tradition, made for right now, and best when shared. Dewar's 12-year-old.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.